Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the new episode of podcast series by BL Inside Circle. Today, we have another guest who is an IIM Kozhikode pass out. She's an alum of IIM Kozhikode from the batch of 2008. She goes by the name Radha Amalraj. She's currently the head of partnerships at Facebook APAC countries and worked with Amazon, Google, Twitter in the past. Today, the theme of the talk is more of her startup journey because she was also part of startups like Karma, Tech, and Droom. So let's welcome Radha ma'am directly and let's hear from her. Welcome, Radha. How are you doing?
Well, thanks, Dheer and Akshat, for having me. I'm doing fine. It's a Saturday in Singapore. Despite the lockdown, it's a nice sunset, as you can see. So, all good.
So, ma'am, let's start with the first question to you. You are a 2008 IIM Kozhikode pass out. So, what has been your journey like? I know now that you're working at Facebook, but I want to know more about your journey since 2008.
Sure. So, as you said, I graduated in 2008, and over the last 13 years, I've worked with different tech companies, large and startups. And I briefly ran my own startup, which was a very exciting and a huge learning journey. And yeah, some currently I work at Facebook. I head the business partnerships for Facebook for Asia Pacific and also for gaming globally. And prior to this, I worked with Twitter. I managed their SMB ads business for APAC. I managed Google's e-commerce vertical for India and Middle East and Africa. And I was a part of the Amazon India launch team. And I've worked in a fair share of startups as well. So it's been a lot of interesting experiences so far.
Ma'am, we had this subject in our curriculum, that is digital business model transformation, which deals with exactly the kind of transformation that you were mentioning about. From the journey of being an incumbent and how does an incumbent face so many challenges to adapt to the startups that are coming up. So one of the cases there we had was Airbnb and how it's actually disrupting the hotel industry. So, how do you think today's startups that have been coming up are actually challenging the FAANGs of the world, the Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet? How do you think, there's so many, how the startups are actually, evolving and actually challenging these big companies, big companies? Yeah.
Well, if you look at tech industry, how it works, essentially most tech companies start by identifying a need and then they build a product and then they build a business around it. Let's say Google transformed, like Google identify a need that there could be better ways to search for information. Amazon saw that there's a far better way to shop with a much larger selection and a far more convenient experience. Facebook figured that there should be a better way to connect people and to bring the world closer to each other. So they all started with a really fundamental need. And I think, and all of these companies started out as startups a couple of decades back. And now they've been able to build up to such a size because the need they identified, the opportunity was so big. And it was kind of universal and it was global. And that was something that wasn't going to change with the shifts that's happening. Like the way somebody searches for information changes constantly, but that need to look for information, the information being power, that isn't going to change for quite some time. So I think startups that understand about what need they're trying to solve for and then put in place the best product solution to be able to solve for that effectively and are able to then build a successful business, a monetizable business product around that, are the startups that's going to really make a mark in the tech industry.
Ma'am, how does the Indian ecosystem, according to you, fare out as compared to the global competition in terms of startups, in terms of the new age companies?
I would say the whole startup ecosystem is thriving in a very big way now. And it might seem counterintuitive given the pandemic context that we are in. And all of us know that there's been a significant economic impact, jobs have been lost, and generally the purse strings have gotten tightened a lot. But what's also happened is that there's been a massive digital acceleration. What would have taken digital to progress over 10 years has happened in the last 1.5 years. And looking at figures, the investment and the funding that's come into the Indian ecosystem this year, in the first half of this year, has been a lot more than the entire last year. And that just, is a testimony of how things are constantly evolving in the startup ecosystem and how it's really a great time. And in the case of India specifically, being an emerging market, there is a lot of breadth and depth of adoption that's happening. With in terms of breadth, there is clearly an increase in the number of people who are getting to be internet, getting to use internet is increasing with the improved connectivity, with the number of low-cost devices that's coming out in the market, with the vernacular internet access that's available to people. And in terms of depth, there's a lot more of, be it, let's say, entertainment. People are consuming videos like never before. And in terms of the amount of disposable income that's being spent online, that's again increasing day after day. So if you look at both the depth and breadth of adoption, it's just all the macro indicators are clearly telling us the story that it's going to increase. And with all the shifts that's been fast tracked because of the pandemic context and the digital acceleration that's happening, I truly think that digital ecosystem is facing probably one of its best years, and it's clearly going to be an upward trajectory in the time to come.
Ma'am, one question that I had is, since the digital ecosystem has seen a very huge increase in the last year, I mean year-on-year growth. So is that growth sustainable? Like, considering a simple retail store, a retail store may have shifted most of its customers from retail stores to e-commerce, but is that sustainable in the long term? Like, maybe not in this year, maybe say by the end of 2020, once the lockdowns and the pandemic ends, do we it's expected that the shoppers will go back to the stores to look at, to be more close to the product. Touch and feel of it will be very crucial for the product. So in that sense, how do you see e-commerce evolving in the next 1 year or so to counter the sustenance, whether the e-commerce model is actually being to thrive in a longer period of time?
I think e-commerce is one part of the whole digital ecosystem. There are many other models, and there's so many pieces to the digital transformation that's unfolding. Talking specifically about e-commerce, what we've seen through pandemic context is that things like, let's say, ordering grocery online or food delivery, that was anyway a behavior that people were tending towards, just got accelerated significantly, and it became a necessity. And research shows that once people change their habits, especially in terms of digital adoption, typically they do not go back to the previous ways, because it's like they've tasted blood. They see how much more convenient it is, and how much easier the process is, and the variety of selection they have. So from a user consumer standpoint, there is just a lot of incentive to go digital. And what happens is, you're right, from a business standpoint, it's a much longer cycle, because it calls for a change in the way, a complete transformation in many ways, for them to look at the way they were doing their business. They might have made some changes during pandemic, but it's obviously a lot easier for them to go back to the pre-pandemic ways. But what's going to happen is, because the user habits have changed and those changes are here to stay, so the businesses again will have to really adopt and adapt and look at this paradigm shift a lot more closely, because it's not a temporary phenomenon. It's here to stay. And the businesses that will actually see this change and are able to evolve and really quickly adapt to the new model are the ones that are going to stay.
Ma'am, so our next question is about, we would love to know more about the startup journey which you had. I'm not sure, should I call this a failed startup journey, because you were the founder of Karma Tech, and of course, you will have your story for this, but how did you deal with the failure? And what's your next short-term plan, maybe in the next 5 years? Do you want to re-enter the startup world, or do you want to do you want to continue working at Facebook, or maybe the other MNCs you were part of?
I think you should definitely call it a failed startup journey. And I think I wear the failure tag, I think, with some level of pride. And obviously, it's been a great learning journey. It's been a truly humbling journey. And what I look at it for, I think more than the, branding of what it was, when I look back at that journey, it was truly one of the best learning experiences of my career. And it was just so different from anything else I've done in my career. Just the level of, I think, mental toughness it required, and the conviction I had to have in order to persist through that journey was truly something that taught me a lot. In terms of future, I'm a person who hasn't planned for things a lot. I've kind of went with whatever was challenging, and I've gone with the flow largely. So I do love startups, and that's something very close to my heart. So currently, I invest very actively in startups. I'm advising a bunch of startups. So that's something I would love to continue doing and do a lot more of, and see where things take me.
Ma'am, our next question is for a young entrepreneur who just wants to start, maybe someone like me or Akshat who will pass out from the college, from the MBA college a few months from now. If we want to, if we have a great idea and we have worked out on all the BMCs and all the financial models and everything, and we want to just start, just go with the word green signal. How do you recommend, or how do you suggest us uh, to find investors, or what should that investment journey be?
My first advice for somebody who's an aspiring entrepreneur is to be clear about the reasons for why one wants to be an entrepreneur. Uh, it is a very rewarding journey, but it's a challenging journey. It requires a lot of conviction, it requires a lot of perseverance and persistence. So one needs to be clear about why they're getting into it and what they're signing up for. And I would say the second aspect to look at is there needs to be this problem statement or an idea that one needs to be truly passionate about. Let's say the need that I spoke about earlier that a startup is trying to solve for. One should be really passionate about that need. The startup could take different shapes in terms of how it ends up solving for that need. But an aspiring entrepreneur should see that need as something challenging and something that they would like to invest a couple of years of their life trying to solve for. So I would say these would be the first two aspects. I think one thing that a lot of people think about is, hey, what if it fails? What do I do then? And the fear of failure is something that all of us grapple with. So what I can definitely point out is today than ever before, and it's just improving day after day. There's a lot of respect for the entrepreneurial journey and the learnings it brings. And every large corporate and all forms of corporates really value that experience of that an entrepreneur brings, even a failed entrepreneur like myself brings to the table. So I would say if you are clear about your reason and if you feel passionate about the problem you want to solve for, go for it. And in terms of the second part of your question about fundraising, firstly, I would, all of us read about these exciting figures of, unicorns and how many billions and millions they've raised. But I think at times it probably takes too much importance than it should. There is a lot more to fundraising, especially if one is just thinking of starting out. Funding is not the be all of the journey. I would ideally, when I talk to startups, when I talk to somebody who's just starting out, I typically like those startups that are looking to bootstrap or raise money from their friends and family and try it out on a small scale before they actually go and raise external money. And think of funding as, let's say, think of a vehicle that's moving uphill. Like if the startup is not catering to a strong need in the market, no matter how much funding and push it gets, it's still going to be an uphill journey that's going to be difficult. And let's say if it's a startup that's solving for a really good need, it's easy downhill. It'll go on its own, and funding is just going to accelerate it further. So funding is definitely one of the factors, but it's not the most important factor. And as an investor, what I look for are signals around the founder, because it's very easy. Like I'm forming a hypothesis about the need and what the startup is trying to do, but it's a hypothesis. What I have in front of me are signals about the founder and the founding team. I look for factors like, has this person had a consistent track record? Do I feel like they have the conviction and persistence that it takes to build a successful startup? Do I see them continuing and creating value? Will they be able to raise money? Will they be able to just evolve and navigate through the various complexities? So these are some of the things I look for. And as a budding entrepreneur, when you look for investors, you should, again, look for an investor who adds value, who you have a value match with, who you see as a person who has that conviction and who will be able to bring in the connections and the right guidance to you. So it's kind of, a mutual selection that needs to happen on both sides.
So maybe what you're saying is that whenever a potential investor is looking at a potential entrepreneur, they just don't look at the product or the company. They look at you, the founder, the entire maybe background and how passionate they are, and whatever the criteria is in their head, that this particular person is so passionate that even in spite of changing times of pandemic or whatever, and the company is not maybe crossing the break even for the first few years, he will not give up, or he or she will not give up. Is that what you're saying? Like passion is more important in the cycle than skills or other research thing.
What I'm saying is, especially in early stages of a startup, there isn't a lot of data, there isn't a lot of financials, there isn't a lot of product market fit data or other data to really evaluate the startup based on. And in that case, the founding team, the tangibles and intangibles around the founding team becomes crucial for an investor to take a decision if this is the right startup to work with. And it's a combination of skill sets. It's really dependent on the mindset, and it's about I would say the intangibles really become important. I definitely look for a track record. I look at, let's say, has this person is this person showing a consistent good track record? Have they worked hard? Do I see the persistence, and do I see the passion? Do they bring in relevance from their previous experiences and their work for what they're trying to do here? And if not, do I see the learnability? Do I see this person as somebody who'll be able to build a team, manage a team, and raise more money? And is this person dynamic enough to navigate through various changes? So these are definitely factors I look at when I decide to invest in a startup.
Okay, so my next question is basically how does actually one look to enter entrepreneurship when the market situation is so, I mean, not facilitating startups at the same time, because the pandemic has come out and it's prolonged. So how do you suggest, how does one look to, enter entrepreneurship at this point?
Well, I think any day is a good day for entrepreneurship. And especially in the pandemic context, I think a lot of shifts are happening, and that brings with it a lot of opportunities. As long as one is able to have an idea that one is very passionate about, that one sees a clear need for, and also sees the associated opportunities and challenges that have come about because of the pandemic. I think if these factors are in place, one should totally go for it. This is the moment. And like I shared, funding has never been as good as it looks like currently in quite a while. So all signals and macro and micro indicators are clearly suggesting that this is a good time to go for it.
Before we formally conclude, one final question, because this is our question, because we are currently students of IIM Kozhikode MBA program. What should a student ideally prepare if they plan to join a dot-com startup or a social media startup like Facebook, or the new age companies like Google, Twitter, because you have already been part of? So any maybe some quick insights about the interview preparation?
Okay, firstly, Facebook is not a social media startup, and Google and Netflix aren't the only new age companies. Having said that, your question is about how, as students, should you be looking at being a part of tech? First is definitely, I would endorse that tech is a great place to be. There are lots of opportunities, lots of changes, and it's really exciting. And you would get to work with really smart people and have ownership for some solid areas to work on. And in terms of making the cut to show that you're the right fit for a tech company, as when I'm hiring people, the things I look for are people who have the general skill sets, right, that are required to be successful in any corporate setup. Analytical skills, soft skills, just a lot of resilience to navigate through various changes. I think so. A combination of all of these skills is something I look for. In addition, specifically for tech, I look for people who have that ability to deal with ambiguity, because of the changes that we go through on a day-to-day basis. In addition to resilience, there has to be a good level of comfort with ambiguities and being able to structure things and put systems and processes on the fly. I also look for people who have an ownership mindset. We spoke a lot about entrepreneurship. I look for those entrepreneurial people. Entrepreneurs are the ones we need in tech companies. We need people who are able to bring in those skill sets and mindset in a corporate setup and really function like an entrepreneur within the large structures of a corporate setup. And finally, yeah, somebody who's culturally would be at home, who's non-hierarchical and who's open-minded. We want people who are coming in new to the company to be able to challenge the status quo and really add value by being open-minded and asking the right set of questions. So yeah, it seems intangible, but really these are the things that really help me as a hiring manager decide who would be the right person who makes the cut.
So I'll go for the formal conclusion and vote of thanks. Uh, so thank you, Radha ma'am, for taking your time on a Saturday evening and showing us that beautiful sunset. Now, we in this talk had discussed extensively on the digital business models, digital transformation of companies, how incumbents place themselves, and how basically startups are actually trying to challenge the status quo. And finally, we ended with how should a student look at the tech jobs or the tech job mindsets. So thank you, ma'am. Hope we had multiple takeaways in the session. Hope our viewers have it too. Thank you all.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to talk to folks from IIMK. And if you're looking to raise funds, if you're seeking any guidance, if you're a startup founder, feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn.